The wind howled outside Oak Ridge Animal Clinic as I, Dr. Emily Foster, filed my last patient report of the day. Rain pelted against the windows, creating a steady drumbeat that matched my tired movements. My shoulders ached from a 12-hour shift that had included 2 emergency surgeries and a seemingly endless stream of routine checkups. Just 5 more minutes, I mumbled to myself, organizing the last of my paperwork. The clock on the wall showed 8:55 p.m., and I could already taste the chamomile tea waiting for me at home. Suddenly, the front door burst open with a gust of wet air, making me jump. Jack Thompson, the local animal control officer, stumbled in, his uniform soaked. In his arms, wrapped in a soggy towel, was a small bundle that trembled violently. Dr. Foster, Jack said, water dripping from his cap. I'm sorry to come so late, but I didn't know where else to go. My exhaustion momentarily lifted as my medical instincts kicked in. What have you got there? Jack carefully unwrapped the towel, revealing a golden brown puppy no more than 4 months old. Its fur was matted with rain and mud, and its eyes were huge with fear. Found this little guy behind the grocery store. The shelter's packed full. We've got twice as many animals as we should. Tomorrow morning, he trailed off, but I knew what he meant. The shelter's euthanasia schedule was an unfortunate reality I'd learned to live with, even if I never got used to it. Jack, I began, my heart already aching. You know I can't take in another stray. The clinic is at capacity, and the puppy let out a small whimper that seemed to pierce straight through my carefully constructed walls. Just for tonight, Jack pleaded. Maybe we can find something tomorrow. I sighed and gestured to the exam table. As Jack set the puppy down, I grabbed a fresh towel and began drying the trembling creature. Despite my determination to remain professional, my touch was gentle, motherly almost. The puppy responded by pressing against my hands, seeking warmth. During my examination, my fingers found a collar beneath the matted fur. It was worn leather, cracked and faded. I squinted at the nearly illegible text, but the letters were too worn to make out. Well, you're healthy at least, I told the puppy, trying to ignore how its tail wagged at the sound of my voice. No signs of injury or illness? Jack watched hopefully, but I shook my head. I'll keep him overnight in the clinic, but that's all I can do. I knew if I let myself get attached, the pain would be unbearable. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Leading the puppy to the holding kennels, I placed it inside with a soft blanket and some water. As I closed the door, the puppy pressed its nose against the bars, those soulful brown eyes following my every move. Its small whimper echoed in the quiet clinic, making my chest tighten with an emotion I refused to name. The next morning arrived with patches of sunlight breaking through the storm clouds. I sat in my car outside the clinic, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had long since gone cold. I'd barely slept, my mind drifting back to those pleading brown eyes. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the clinic doors 15 minutes earlier than usual. The familiar antiseptic smell greeted me, along with the occasional bark or meow from the overnight patients. I hung up my coat and organized my files, doing everything possible to delay the inevitable visit to the holding kennels. Finally, I couldn't put it off any longer. Walking down the corridor, my footsteps echoed against the tile floor. The puppy was already awake, its tail thumping against the kennel floor the moment it saw me. "Good morning, little one," I said softly, surprised by the warmth in my own voice. The puppy responded with a happy whine that made my heart flutter. I opened the kennel door, and the puppy immediately pressed against my legs, seeking attention. Its fur had dried overnight, revealing a beautiful golden brown coat that shimmered in the morning light. My fingers found themselves scratching behind its ears before I could stop myself. "Let's take a better look at that collar, shall we?" I carefully lifted the puppy onto the examination table. In the bright morning light, I could see the leather collar was expensive despite its worn condition. My fingers worked carefully to unbuckle it, and as I turned it over in my hands, something caught my eye. There, on the inside of the collar, were faint engravings. I squinted, tilting the collar toward the light. My heart began to race as the words became clear. "If found, bring me home." Below the message was an address, 1247 Maple Grove Road. My hands began to shake. I knew that address. Everyone in town knew that address. 3 years ago, the Victorian house that once stood there had burned to the ground in a tragic fire. Now it was just an empty lot, surrounded by a chain-link fence and overgrown with weeds. The puppy nudged my hand with its wet nose, bringing me back to the present. I stared at the collar, then at the puppy, my mind racing with questions. Should I dig deeper into this mystery? The logical part of my brain told me to leave it alone, to call Jack and have him take the puppy to another shelter in the next town. But as I looked into those trusting brown eyes, something stirred inside me. Years of keeping people and animals at arm's length had made me an expert at ignoring my instincts, but this felt different. This felt important. The puppy sat quietly, watching me with an almost knowing expression. I ran my fingers over the engraved address again, a strange certainty settling over me. There was more to this story, more to this puppy than a simple case of abandonment. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove Road as my car crawled to a stop in front of 1247. The burned-out lot stood like an open wound in the otherwise well-kept neighborhood. Chain-link fencing surrounded the property, but years of neglect had allowed wild grass and thorny bushes to claim the space where a house once stood. I sat in my car, the collar clutched in my hand, its engraving catching the sunlight. The puppy dozed in a carrier on the passenger seat, occasionally making small sleeping sounds. What happened here? I whispered to myself, stepping out of the car. As I approached the fence, movement caught my eye. An elderly woman emerged from the house next door, a watering can in her weathered hands. "Can I help you?" she called out, her voice kind but cautious. I walked over, introducing myself. "I'm Dr. Foster from the animal clinic. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm trying to learn about the family that lived here." The woman's face softened with recognition. "I'm Margaret Collins. I've lived here for 40 years. She set down her watering can. "Such a tragedy. What happened to the Wilson family?" "Could you tell me about them?" I asked gently. Margaret's eyes grew distant. "Robert and Lisa Wilson. They moved here with their children in 2019. The fire happened just a year later." She dabbed at her eyes with her apron. "The police said it started in the kitchen late at night. They found most of the family." I noticed Margaret's choice of words. "Most?" Margaret nodded slowly. "Their youngest, Charlie. He was just 6. They never found him? The police searched for weeks, but..." She trailed off, looking at the overgrown lot. "Some say he must have wandered off before the fire. Others think..." She couldn't finish the sentence. My hand tightened around the collar. "When exactly did this happen?" 3 years ago next month," Margaret replied. "July 15th, 2020. I'll never forget that date." I thanked Margaret and walked back to my car, my mind racing. Something about this didn't add up. The collar looked old, yes, but not 3 years old. And why would it appear now on a puppy that seemed barely a few months old? Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and began searching news articles about the fire. The puppy stirred in its carrier, watching me with those knowing eyes. As I scrolled through the articles, a chill ran down my spine. There were so many unanswered questions about that night. The cause of the fire remained uncertain. The missing child was never found. No bodies were ever... Movement in my rearview mirror caught my attention. A figure stood in the shadows of a large oak tree across the street, partially hidden behind the trunk. When I turned to look directly, the figure was gone, leaving me to wonder if my mind was playing tricks on me. Back at my small ranch house, I spread old newspaper clippings across my kitchen table. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I barely noticed. The dim light from my reading lamp cast a warm glow over the yellowing papers, each one telling a piece of the tragic story. "Wilson family, fire claims 4, one headline declared, but as I read deeper, the details didn't match. Only 3 bodies were found. Lisa Wilson, her husband Robert, and their older son David. Charlie, the youngest, had vanished without a trace. I picked up my phone, hesitating for just a moment before dialing. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Garrett here." "Alex, it's Emily Foster." "Doc, long time no hear. What's got you calling at this hour?" I glanced at the clock, 10:45 p.m. "I need some information about an old case. The Wilson house fire from 3 years ago." There was a pause on the other end. "That's ancient history, Em. Why are you digging into that?" I told him about the puppy and the collar, trying to keep the urgency out of my voice. "Something's not adding up, Alex. I can feel it." "Look," Alex's voice softened, "that case tore this town apart. We searched for months. The kid was never found. But what if..." "I'll send you what I can," he interrupted. "But, Em, be careful. Some cases are better left alone." The next morning at the clinic, my assistant Olivia watched me with worried eyes as I pored over the files Alex had sent. "Dr. Foster?" Olivia's gentle voice broke through my concentration. That puppy needs his morning checkup. I nodded absently, still reading. Doc, Olivia placed a hand on my shoulder. I know that look. You're getting wrapped up in something big, aren't you? I finally looked up at my young assistant. Olivia's face was etched with concern. I need to know the truth, Olivia. The truth? Olivia sighed, sitting down beside me. Or are you looking for another broken thing to fix, like after Thomas? The name hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't heard anyone mention my late husband in years. This is different, I insisted, but my voice wavered. Is it? Olivia's eyes were kind but firm. You can't save everyone, Doc. Sometimes you have to let the past stay in the past. I stood up and walked to the recovery area where the puppy lay sleeping. Its chest rose and fell peacefully, paws twitching slightly as it dreamed. Those mysterious eyes that seemed to hold so many secrets were now closed in peaceful slumber. Looking at the sleeping pup, I felt my resolve strengthen. Olivia was wrong. This wasn't about saving anyone. This was about uncovering the truth. And something told me this puppy was the key to it all. The morning sun had barely risen when my phone buzzed on my desk. I'd been at the clinic since dawn, unable to sleep after spending most of the night reviewing the Wilson case files. Emily, you need to hear this. Alex's voice crackled through the speaker. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with an urgency that made me sit up straight. What is it? I've been going through old witness statements. 3 different people reported seeing a child matching Charlie Wilson's description weeks after the fire. We dismissed them at the time, thought they were just desperate to help, but Alex paused, papers rustling in the background. One witness swore she saw a boy with a puppy living in the woods behind the old Miller property. My heart began to race. Alex, are you saying? I'm saying the kid might have survived somehow, and if he did, he could still be out there, Alex finished, his voice barely above a whisper. I hung up and hurried to the recovery area where the puppy lay in its kennel. The mysterious collar felt heavier than ever in my pocket. Olivia was already there preparing medications for the day's patients. Olivia, can you pull up the Wilson family photo from the news archives? Olivia frowned but did as asked, turning her computer screen toward me. The image showed a happy family of 4. Mother, father, and 2 boys. The younger one, Charlie, couldn't have been more than 7. I lifted the puppy from its kennel and held it facing the screen. The reaction was immediate and startling. The dog's ears perked up, its tail began wagging frantically, and it let out a series of excited whimpers, pawing at the air toward the image. Oh my God, Olivia whispered, her skepticism visibly shaken. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. The shelter's number flashed on the screen. My stomach dropped as I answered. Dr. Foster, this is Dave from County Animal Control. About that stray brought in yesterday? We need him transferred back here by noon. The euthanasia schedule? No, I cut him off, my voice firm. I need more time. Doc, we're overcrowded as it is. Rules are rules. The puppy pressed against my leg, those knowing eyes looking up at me. In that moment, I knew this wasn't just about saving a dog. It was about solving a mystery that had haunted our town for years. A child's life might depend on what I did next. Olivia, I turned to my assistant, determination written across my face. Cancel my appointments for the day. All of them. But, Dr. Foster, this can't wait anymore. That little boy might still be out there, and this puppy might be our only link to finding him. My car screeched into the shelter's parking lot, sending gravel flying. My hands shook as I rushed through the front doors, the morning sun casting long shadows through the windows. The puppy from yesterday, I gasped to the young man at the front desk. I need to see him right away. Lucas Bennett, his name tag gleaming under the fluorescent lights, looked up from his computer with concerned eyes. The tan mixed breed? I'm sorry, Dr. Foster, but they already took him. The blood drained from my face. Took him where? To the county facility, and Lucas checked his watch, about 20 minutes ago. No, I whispered, already backing toward the door. Which facility? The one on Oak Street? But Dr. Foster? I was already running back to my car. The drive across town felt like an eternity. Every red light and obstacle between me and saving not just a puppy, but possibly the key to a decade-old mystery seemed insurmountable. My tires squealed as I took corners too fast, my heart pounding in my chest. The county facility loomed ahead, a stark concrete building with chain-linked fences. I parked haphazardly, leaving my car door open as I sprinted toward the entrance. Just as I reached for the door handle, movement caught my eye. A man was walking quickly around the side of the building, carrying something wrapped in a blanket. The puppy's familiar tan tail hung limply from the bundle. Without thinking, I changed course, racing after the man. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice raw with desperation. "Please, stop!" The man turned, startled by my approach. I recognized him as one of the facility workers, though I couldn't recall his name. "Dr. Foster?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. "That Pompey?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath. I need to see him." The man's face softened with understanding. "I'm sorry, Doc. We're just following protocol. The paperwork came through, and—" "Please," I interrupted, my voice breaking. "You don't understand. That puppy, he might be the key to solving a missing persons case. A child who disappeared years ago." The worker's eyes widened. Slowly, he unwrapped the bundle, revealing the puppy's trembling form. Those soulful brown eyes met mine, and I felt a surge of hope. "Give me 24 hours, I pleaded. "If I'm wrong, I'll bring him back myself. But if I'm right, we might be able to bring a lost child home." The man hesitated, glancing between me and the puppy. Finally, he nodded. 24 hours, Doc, not a minute." I cradled the puppy in my arms, its small body trembling against mine as I rushed back to my car. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on me. I had 24 hours to uncover the truth. A truth that could change everything for this little animal and possibly for a missing boy who had been lost for years. Back at the clinic, I set the puppy down on the examination table and stared into its eyes. "All right, little one," I whispered. "Let's figure this out together." My mind raced with possibilities. If Charlie Wilson had survived the fire, how had he ended up with this puppy? And why now, after all these years, was the dog found wandering alone? I decided to start with the engraved collar. The address on it had led me to the burned-down Wilson home, but there had to be more clues hidden in its worn leather. I carefully examined every inch of it under a magnifying glass. At first, nothing stood out until I noticed faint scratches near the buckle. They weren't random. They looked like deliberate markings, letters and numbers, barely visible. "Olivia!" I called out urgently to my assistant. She hurried into the room. "What is it?" "Look at this," I said, pointing to the scratches on the collar. "It looks like coordinates." Olivia squinted at the markings, then nodded. "You're right. Those could be GPS coordinates." Without wasting another second, I entered the numbers into my phone's mapping app. The location popped up, a wooded area about 15 miles outside town, near an old hiking trail that hadn't been used in years. "You're not seriously thinking of going out there," Olivia said, her voice tinged with worry. "I have to," I replied firmly. "If there's even a chance Charlie is alive, if this puppy led us here for a reason—" My voice trailed off as I looked at the dog, who was now wagging its tail excitedly, as if it understood what was happening. Olivia sighed but grabbed her coat. "I'm coming with you." The drive to the wooded area was tense and silent. The puppy sat in Olivia's lap, occasionally whining and pawing at the window as if eager to get moving. When we arrived, the trailhead was barely visible through overgrown bushes and fallen branches. "This place hasn't been touched in years," Olivia murmured. I carried the puppy as we navigated through the dense forest, following the GPS coordinates on my phone. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. No birds chirping, no rustling leaves. Just an eerie stillness that made my heart race. After nearly an hour of searching, we reached a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. In the center of it stood a small makeshift shelter made of tarps and branches, a structure that looked like it had been built by hand. Olivia gasped. "Emily, someone's been living here." We approached cautiously, unsure of what we'd find. The puppy began squirming in my arms, barking excitedly as if it recognized something, or someone. "Hello?" I called out hesitantly. My voice echoed through the clearing. For a moment there was silence. Then from behind the shelter a figure emerged, a boy no older than 10, his clothes tattered and his face streaked with dirt. His wide eyes locked onto mine before shifting to the puppy in my arms. The boy froze as tears welled up in his eyes. "Max?" he whispered hoarsely. The puppy leapt from my arms and sprinted toward him, tail wagging furiously. The boy dropped to his knees as Max, the name he'd called out, jumped into his arms, licking his face with unrestrained joy. "Oh!" Olivia clutched my arm tightly as realization dawned on both of us. "It's him," she whispered in disbelief. "It's Charlie." I approached slowly, not wanting to scare him. "Charlie?" I asked gently. The boy looked up at me with tear-filled eyes but didn't say anything at first. He held Max tightly as if afraid he might disappear again. "It's okay," I said softly. "You're safe now." Back at the clinic later that evening, Charlie sat quietly with Max by his side while Olivia made calls to local authorities and social services. He was still shaken, but seemed calmer now that he was indoors and surrounded by people who wanted to help him. Through bits and pieces of conversation and a lot of patience, we learned what had happened after the fire 3 years ago. Charlie had escaped into the woods during the chaos, but had gotten lost before anyone could find him. He'd survived by scavenging food and building shelters out of whatever he could find. A remarkable feat for someone so young. Max had been his companion through it all, a stray puppy who had found Charlie shortly after he'd fled into the woods. The two had formed an unbreakable bond, relying on each other for comfort and survival in their isolation. As authorities worked to reunite Charlie with his extended family, who had long believed him lost forever, I couldn't help but marvel at Max's role in this incredible story. Against all odds, this little dog had kept Charlie alive and safe for years when no one else could find him. A week later, standing outside my clinic as Charlie prepared to leave town with his aunt and uncle as new guardians, I watched as he hugged Max tightly one last time before placing him back in my arms. "I want you to keep him," Charlie said, quietly but firmly. I blinked back tears. "Are you sure? He's your hero." Charlie smiled faintly but nodded. "He saved me, but now he can save others too." His gaze met mine with a wisdom far beyond his years. As their car pulled away down the road, Max rested his head against my shoulder, letting out a soft sigh of contentment. In that moment, I knew that this little dog wasn't just any stray. He was extraordinary. Against all odds, Max had proven himself not just a survivor, but a hero who embodied hope and resilience when everything seemed lost. And now it was my turn to make sure his story and Charlie's would never be forgotten.